Frank's journey back to consciousness was a turbulent one, his head swaying back and forth like a pendulum caught between realms. Each tremor that coursed through his body seemed to echo the tumultuous events that had led him here. Slowly, as if swimming against a relentless current, he fought the heavy fog of drugs that still clung to his senses, dragging him back from the brink of unconsciousness. In the dim recesses of his mind, fragmented memories flashed with alarming clarity. He saw Rodriguez, bound and lifeless in that cold bunker, a bag tightly taped over his head, a stark reminder of the reality of war. Thoughts of the shadowy figures who had tended to him inside the armored personnel carrier, their presence like silent guardians amidst chaos, drifted through his consciousness. They had brought him back from the brink of death, their ghostly presence a haunting contrast to the relentless brutality of their ill-fated crusade. The vibrations intensified, matching the thrum of the vehicle's engine that had become his only anchor in this disorienting journey. Frank struggled against the weight that pressed down on him, his eyelids heavy as he fought to pry them open. Through a narrow slit, he glimpsed the familiar darkness inside the rough burlap sack, a sight that stirred both dread and a strange sense of resignation. Amidst the vibrations and the distant hum of the radio, barely audible above the engine's steady drone, Frank pieced together his surroundings. The murmur of voices around him, the occasional grunt as bodies shifted under the vehicle's sway, told him he was not alone. The tight confinement and the rhythmic turns suggested they were en route to a destination deep within enemy territory. In the haze of his disorientation, time seemed to melt away into a murky abyss. How many hours had slipped by in unconsciousness? How far had they journeyed through the labyrinthine paths of enemy territory? The potent drugs, injected with ruthless efficiency, still clung to his senses like a suffocating shroud, their ghostly tendrils weaving through his consciousness. As he lay there, caught between fleeting moments of awareness, memories coalesced with painful clarity. The cool draft that whispered through the vehicle's interior carried with it the chilling echoes of his captivity, an echo of being ensnared and vulnerable in the confines of a river cage, where time seemed suspended like a wisp of smoke. Time blurred and fragmented for Frank, caught in the murky depths between wakefulness and unconsciousness. Minutes stretched endlessly, each second a battleground where fragments of awareness fought against the suffocating embrace of drug-induced oblivion. His mind flickered like a dying candle, struggling to hold onto fleeting memories and fleeting thoughts that slipped through his grasp like smoke through fingers. Through the haze, the relentless drone of the vehicle's engine pulsed like a distant heartbeat, a monotonous rhythm that anchored him to the present. Yet, even that tether seemed tenuous, wavering as his consciousness ebbed and flowed like the tide. Shadows danced on the edges of his perception, phantom whispers that teased at the fringes of his awareness. Then, as if summoned by some unseen force, the vehicle's relentless pace began to wane. The steady hum softened to a gentle purr, a subtle shift that reverberated through the cramped confines around him. In that moment, Frank sensed a collective exhale, a shared release of tension mingled with an undercurrent of anxious relief. Murmurs swirled like autumn leaves in the wind, voices hushed yet laden with the weight of unspoken fears and weary anticipation. They had arrived. The realization crept over Frank like a chill wind, stirring him from the depths of his stupor. His senses, dulled by drugs and disorientation, slowly stirred to life. The cool touch of the breeze that slipped through the vehicle's open hatch brushed against his skin, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant smoke. Shapes began to coalesce in the dim light filtering through the burlap sack that still shrouded his vision, outlines sharpening into tangible forms that whispered of imminent danger. Abruptly, his world exploded into blinding light as the burlap sack was torn from his head with brutal force. The sudden onslaught of brightness was disorienting, forcing Frank to squint against the glare. Before he could adjust, a fist met his face with cruel intent, a harsh welcome to the reality that awaited him beyond the sack's suffocating darkness. Frank, his hands tightly bound behind his back, was yanked unceremoniously from the vehicle by one of the soldiers. He hit the ground hard, the impact jolting through his restrained body. Looking up, Disoriented, Frank realized he was within the confines of a fortified compound. Armed men moved purposefully around, trucks coming and going through the walled enclosure. The building itself, surrounded by towering cement walls, stood as a grim fortress amid the war-torn city, now a focal point for violence and unspeakable atrocities. The compound bore the scars of unrelenting conflict, its walls etched with the wounds of countless bullets, a grim testament to the fierce battles that had ravaged it. Through the shifting tides of war, this stronghold looked as if it had changed hands repeatedly, each turnover leaving behind a grim legacy of bloodshed and despair. Inside, the inner walls recounted a chilling chronicle of camaraderie betrayed and lives lost. Stains of blood, marking the executions of both allies and enemies, adorned the weathered surfaces. In a corner of the compound, a gaping pit to hell lay open, an eternal resting place for the unfortunate souls who were cast into its depths, its darkness a solemn reminder of the carnage that had consumed the place. Amidst smoldering embers, casting an eerie glow in the shadows, the air was thick with the scent of smoke and the echoes of lives consumed by conflict. The soldier who had dragged Frank out loomed over him, rifle menacingly pointed, prodding him with the barrel. Another soldier approached from behind, roughly hoisting Frank to his feet and shoving him towards the building's entrance. With a final shove, Frank crashed into the door, which swung open violently, sending him sprawling inside. Within, the building unveiled its true nature, a decrepit police station transformed into a makeshift headquarters by the enemy forces. As Frank stumbled into the dimly lit room, his gaze swept across a scene that spoke volumes of its sinister occupation. Radio equipment crackled with intermittent transmissions, their blinking lights casting eerie shadows amidst the sparse illumination. Ammunition crates were stacked haphazardly against the walls, their contents gleaming dully in the ambient light, a chilling reminder of the firepower wielded by those who now held sway in this forsaken outpost. Bound to a weathered chair, the mutilated remains of what appeared to be the former police chief slumped forward, his features frozen in a grimace of agony. The stench of decay hung heavy in the stale air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood that pooled beneath the chair's legs, staining the cracked linoleum floor. In the shadowed corner, another officer lay motionless, slumped against the peeling wallpaper. His lifeless fingers still gripped a service revolver, its barrel pointed towards the ground as if in futile defense against the unfathomable violence that had visited this forsaken outpost. Several soldiers trailed Frank with purposeful steps, their presence amplifying the tension in the air as they guided him through a weathered door. Beyond lay a descending spiral staircase, its worn steps creaking underfoot as they descended deeper into the bowels of the station. The oppressive atmosphere thickened with each step, echoing the weight of impending doom that hung palpably in the stagnant air. At the foot of the staircase, the soldiers maneuvered Frank into a large dungeon-like concrete room with 3 separate cells, slamming Frank up against the metal bars of the first cell in the room. The soldiers' grip tightened on Frank's arms, their expressions hardened by the harsh reality of their occupation. As the soldiers crowded behind him, one delivered a brutal kick to Frank's spine, causing him to collapse, while others targeted his legs mercilessly. Amidst the chaos, a man in the next cell shouted at the soldiers to stop, his pleas falling on deaf ears. Instead, their fury escalated, shouting back at the man as they forcibly dragged Frank into the unlocked cell. A swift kick to his chest knocked the wind from Frank's lungs as he crumpled to the floor. Locked inside the cell, abandoned by the soldiers, Frank lay on the cold ground, his mind still clouded by the potent drugs administered earlier. He drifted in and out of consciousness, barely registering the screams echoing through the building. From within the cell block, a burst of bright, flickering light cast eerie shadows through the bars, while noxious fumes twisted around like malevolent spirits, choking Frank's every breath. Screams can be heard over the shouting in the halls as if the Grim Reaper had revealed himself, pulling the spirits of the damned into the underworld. Confusion and terror gripped Frank as he struggled to comprehend his surroundings. He coughed and wheezed, trying in vain to shield himself from the acrid smoke. The piercing screams echoing from within the cell blended seamlessly with the soldiers' deranged laughter, intertwining into a chilling chorus that reverberated through the air like a macabre symphony. The sounds merged into a haunting cacophony, evoking the eerie atmosphere of a ritualistic ceremony where fear and cruelty danced in unholy harmony, casting a shadow of dread over the forsaken station. His heart raced, pumped full throttle by the drugs, pushing him towards unconsciousness once more. As unspeakable horrors festered within the station, Frank sensed himself gradually slipping away, his grasp on reality growing increasingly tenuous. Sedated heavily by the potent drugs coursing through his veins, he teetered on the precipice of consciousness, caught in a surreal limbo where the sinister shadows of the station's malevolence clawed at the fringes of his mind. Fear gnawed relentlessly at his fading awareness, yet the drugs cocooned him in a numbing haze, blurring the line between nightmarish visions and stark reality. On the walls of the cell, chaotic scribblings scratched by madmen offered a chilling glimpse into the insanity that pervaded the station. As Frank teetered on the edge of darkness, he knew instinctively that survival meant descending into the abyss that awaited him, clinging to the hope that one day he might see the light again.